Hi, good afternoon, everyone here. We're on to our last session of the 3 days of symposium. I don't know whether to cheer or to cry because I don't want it to end. Well, 大家好, 大家好, selamat datang, vanakkam. I'm a Singaporean Chinese, and as you know, Singapore is a melting pot of cultures with Chinese, Indian, Malays, and Eurasians in our countries. And I thought it would just be appropriate to actually welcome everyone in the different languages or dialects as I try my best. And so, I mean, in the past 3 days, we've went through a lot of different themes. We've gone through music, health, and well-being, higher music education and social change, music making in detention, social impact of music making in the Oceania team, music and peace building, and today we actually end the symposium with a theme of the politics and ethics of musicians' roles in society today. I'm Rachel Ho, and I'm currently teaching at the Young Suto Conservatory of Music at the National University of Singapore, and I am so honored and thankful to be here today to participate in this and to actually chair this final session. And I have with me, and I'd like to acknowledge Joe, who's the online facilitator. Hi, Joe. And thank you for being with us so early in the morning. And unfortunately, Tanya is not feeling well, so she can't join us here in person. But we have 3 other presentations who have submitted their video presentations, but who are also online with us on Zoom. We have Cristina. Is she here? And Maria. Yes, maybe if you can turn your camera on, we could see you on screen. Cristina and Maria from Spain. And we have Daniela. Yes, hi Daniela. And we have Hala from Ireland. Are you here? Hi. Yes. Really nice to have you all here with us. I think it's all really pretty early in the morning for you. So thank you for joining. And so without further ado, I would like to pass the time to Cristina and Maria, who will be sharing with us on the inclusion and cooperation in a musical theater project, the case of a Spanish bilingual school.
Good afternoon. It's for us a pleasure to have the opportunity to take part on this edition of SIMM. My colleague, María Rueda-Extremera, and me, Cristina Marin, from the Madrid Open University, would like to share with you this contribution entitled Inclusion and Cooperation in a Musical Theater Project, the case of a Spanish bilingual school. Inclusive education is a widely debated issue in the international educational landscape. It is recognized as a human right and is part of the 4th Sustainable Development Goal of the Global 2030 Agenda. The Spanish educational system is based on the European Recommendation on Key Competences for Lifelong Learning, which are aligned with the global agenda mentioned above. Inclusive education is promoted through several of those competences. This is the legal framework of the project presented below. The characteristics of the project are as follows. The project takes place in a Spanish bilingual school located in Madrid. This project, named Drama and Songs, is developed entirely in English, which is the first foreign language that the students learn at school, so it is not their native language. It consists of a production of a musical theater carried out by the students of each course, under the guidance of their music teachers. The students take part in the different phases and roles of the project. They participate in groups and in the set teams, the sound team, the cast of singers and actors, etc.
In this work, we have proposed the following aims. Firstly, we wanted to analyze the work and organization dynamics between the students and with teachers. Secondly, to analyze what actions are carried out to achieve educational inclusion. Thirdly, to know the effect of artistic activities on psycho-emotional development. And finally, to analyze the strengths and the difficulties of the project. To achieve the described aims, we have the participation of the teaching staff responsible for drama and songs, the 3 teachers of the music subject, 2 of them from the primary education level and the other one from secondary education level. In addition, we have the opportunity to observe 2 groups of students from 4th and 5th grades of primary education. Related with the data collection, interviews were carried out with each teacher, and we do a non-participant observation of 2 sessions of primary education. Afterwards, we carry out a qualitative content analysis of the interviews using Atlas TI software to build the categories.
Well, let's move on the results. Related with the first aim, we identified attitudes of cooperation and promotion of self-autonomy. The teacher built the groups depending on the students' previous skills, resulting on different groupings, same-level students or multi-level students. After that, when the students start to work, the teacher takes a guiding role, as we can see in this quote of the teacher of secondary education. I think the issue is mixing that way of doing groups so that they get used to the fact that sometimes I follow what someone else tells me, who may be an equal, but I follow what they tell me. And sometimes I have to put myself on the line because I see that no one is pulling my group, so we have to put ourselves on the line. There is no one who comes to tell us, do this, do that. Continuing with the first aim, we observed some theatrical improvisation activities, through which they prepare themselves for the rehearsals of the musical itself. The teacher gives some indications to the students and proposes activities for the dialogues. The feedback after each try is given either by the teacher or among students, depending basically on their course. Now, related with objective number 2, we identified actions for educational inclusion, like inclusion positions in order to involve all the members of each working group, including students with special educational needs, who were completely included in every activity. I read aloud the second quote presented here. From the beginning, they know that everyone is essential in the musical, whether they speak more or less without one or of the roles, the musical cannot be done. So we try to emphasize that everyone has their role, even if he or she does not have much text. Without one of them, it can no longer be done.
Regarding the psychoemotional development aim, to include artistic activities in the school curriculum can help to create the opportunity for boys and girls to develop their talents, which in other contexts are hidden. As we can see in this quote, there are many children who have learning difficulties, but they are fantastic at dancing and singing, so it's a wonderful opportunity for those children who generally fail in the subjects they take, to shine in this subject, and to have moments in which their classmates say, "Whoa, how cool you sing, how cool you dance." To finish the results section, when analyzing the interviews, we found that the teachers point out the following strengths and difficulties of the project. On the one hand, they consider that drama and songs improve oral expression, English learning, and improvisation skills. Furthermore, this kind of subjects generates positive dynamics among students and psychoemotional and psychomotor benefits. On the other hand, the teachers find difficulties about coordination between music and English departments. Also, drama and songs is a project carried out entirely in English, so teachers consider use of foreign language is a handicap in comparison with the level of performance they could achieve in their native language.
Well, finally, we'd like to present some ideas arise from this study. We consider that this project, Drama and Songs, can be an educational tool to foster cooperation and to promote self-autonomy in the students. Regardless of previous competencies, success is possible for all students, and it makes inclusion easier than in other academic contexts. This kind of education projects can act as a vehicle to achieve the aims of the national and international agendas mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Here you have the list of references used in these slides. Well, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cristina and Maria. I hope they will come online on Zoom soon, so that if you have any questions, we could leave it to the discussion at the end. It's really very encouraging to see how the different art forms actually come together and to create such a meaningful and inclusive project. So next, I would like to invite Daniela from Colombia, who is a current PhD student at the University of Manchester. She'll be presenting the topic on doing politics by altering the aesthetics, the political role of musicians in the 2019 Chilean Uprising. Daniela, please.
Hello, I hope you are fine. My name is Daniela, and today I'm going to present the theoretical aspect of my research. I'm currently on my third year of my PhD, and although I'm going to emphasize mainly this theoretical argument I've been developing, I will try to illustrate some part with initial insights from my data. So as you can see, the topic of my research is on the role that music had in the 2019 Chilean Uprising. And having that in mind, I want to briefly explain what happened to you on that day, very briefly, because I know that the time is limited. But basically, 4 years ago, in October 2019, there was a big series of protests in Chile that started by the students that were protesting against the rise of metro fares, but quickly these protests developed and many other sectors of the population joined: feminists, people protesting against pensions, for better health system, and they started criticizing what they will be calling as the model, the neoliberal model that they inherited from neoliberalism. And that's why quickly this motto of the protest that I have here in two pictures became famous. When they were questioning the status quo, they were saying it's not 30 pesos, referring to the metro fare, it is 30 years, referring to the consequences of the dictatorship. And here shall be mentioned that Chile was one of these countries that was chosen by the Chicago Boys to introduce the neoliberal model. However, what interested me is that the social uprising, apart from convocating different people and multitudinary marches, it was also an artistic outburst, and with many artists participating in the protest, but also many people that resorted to art to mobilize themselves. And having this in mind, I started thinking about my argument, and the main idea I'm defending is that in the case of Chile, protests were politically transformative, although there were many institutional setbacks. Specifically in the case of Chile, the constitution that was one of the expected outcomes of the protest was voted against it in the plebiscite a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to argue that despite these institutional setbacks, protests were politically transformative because they enabled aesthetic experiences to be possible. And I'm saying that these aesthetic experiences are transformatively politically, even when there is no change in the institutional arena. And I'm trying to show you why by illustrating this point in 3 different sections. However, I just would like to start by explaining what is aesthetics, since it is the core concept of my research. So the idea of aesthetics is mainly related to beauty and pleasure, and is especially related to the world of arts. And indeed, in my research, it is also related with the world of arts because I'm studying music, but I'm trying to problematize this idea. And that's why I'm restoring to the traditional notion of aesthetics that is related to how we grasp the world through our senses. It is related to the sensorial perception. And that's why I'm building my argument on this idea of pragmatism, that the experience, the aesthetic experience, is the primary mode in which human beings interact with their world. And it should be mentioned here that this experience is something that is not individual, but is shaped by the interaction between different subjects, but also by the aesthetic trajectory or all the other past experiences that are molding the present experience of actors. But as I was saying, I am trying to restoring this initial idea of aesthetics, of how we grasp the world with our senses, with and also how we make sense of it using the double meaning of the word sense. And that's why I also am using these ideas of Jacques Rancière and both of his theorizations of aesthetics. So on the one hand, for him, aesthetics have regime of thought that enable us to think. And that's why I have this quotation here, because I found it very illustrative. He says, when we are thinking, we first need to think the thinkable. And in transforming this regime of thought, as I'm going to argue that happened in the case of Chile as promoting these aesthetic experiences, we can welcome the unthinkable. And the second idea of aesthetics I'm using by Jacques Rancière is this idea that for him, the world is, it's a sensible, the reality is a sensible distribution that assigns roles, time, places, and spaces. And in challenging that sensible distribution, that partition of the sensible, what he calls consensus, we can inaugurate other forms of being and other aesthetics of possibility through way of political actions that he calls dissensus. So I'm going to propose how, in the case of Chile, these aesthetic experiences also enable these political actions by showing that there are possible or alternative aesthetic distributions. And with this, and I'm going to finish with this later on, I'm going to explain it better or illustrate it better. By shaping this aesthetics, is it possible to inaugurate other forms of being in the world? That's why I'm saying that protests were transformative by enabling these aesthetic experiences, although they had these institutional setbacks. So I'm going to briefly illustrate this point. So the first idea I'm using to argue this is that in protest, aesthetic experiences are possible. And here is worth to bear in mind that the idea of aesthetics is usually related to locus of beauty or pleasure, and a protest seems then a very adverse setting to study aesthetic experiences. However, what I'm going to do, and especially understanding music not as an object but as an activity, as musicking, is how these aesthetic experiences can happen also in a protest, but that require us to challenge the same understanding that we have of music, because the way in which we experience music in a protest cannot be assimilated to the way in which we experience music with in the privacy of the headphones or in a concert hall, because there are other sounds that are impacting our experiences, and because the music is not only made by the artist, but also by all the protesters and people that were present and the mobilization. That's why we need to bear in mind that in this experience of the song, apart from the music itself, we need to consider the other sounds of protest. So on the one hand, the banging of pots and pans, but also the other sounds that are present in a protest, as the whole of patrol cars, as you can see here, and the sounds related to the police, the screams of people, and all these other sounds. And I have here this quotation that might be very illustrative, because as I'm going to explain later, these ideas of these sounds are also related to the sonic memory of the participants. The second idea I'm trying to show is that music was political because it transformed the consensus by making other sounds listenable. And what I'm doing here is confronting the music that is commonly heard in Chile, the music from the consensus, that I'm using this database from radio sources, and the music most played in Spotify, to confronting it with the music that was listenable during the protest. And here's worth bearing in mind that by making these other sounds possible, these other sounds listenable, we can also welcome the unthinkable by making visible other actors and audible their demands. And the third argument that I'm developing is that in transforming these, people are enabled to have different experiences. And my main argument is that these experiences will be are transformative in the sense that they shape how they are relating to themselves, the other, and the world. And here it's important to bear in mind that although the protests were very creative in the sense that a lot of music were created that answer to the event. Some of the songs that were used by the participants were songs from the period of the Unidad Popular, the period before the dictatorships. So what I'm arguing is that these experiences, aesthetic experiences, enable resonance, and by producing resonance, they are asking the people, the music, not asking, but interpolating the subjects to have a different relationship with themselves, the others, and the world. This idea of resonance is an idea developed by Harmut Rosa that was, in fact, the key speaker of last year. And in my research, I'm saying that this idea of relating differently is promoted by having a different relationship with time. And here it's important to bear in mind that many protesters refer to the 2019 protests in Chile as something that started in the 73 with the dictatorship. And this is very important because in transforming this relationship with time, not only because this past is still present, as we can see it in the songs, but also because this past is present in the way that many protesters refer to the demonstrations as something that resulted from the dictatorship, but also because this past is also projecting their future. And most of them talked about this envisioned future they almost grasped in their hands with the protest in which a life was worth living. And it was a past, it was a future that is rooted in the past, in the period in which there will be no revolutions without sounds, the period of Allende. So if you have more questions, I will be happy to discuss about this, but I hope that my presentation was clear enough, and I will be very happy to receive your feedback and comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniela. Lots to think about on the role of music in this kind of political uprising, which I think we'll discuss more at the end of the session. Our last presentation, it's by Hala Jaber, and she will be presenting on trauma-informed practitioner, how do I become one?
Hello, my name is Hala Jaber, and I have been asking myself, a trauma-informed practitioner, how do I become one? Since I was conducting my doctoral degree, where I facilitated community music workshops with refugees and asylum seekers, who were predominantly from Syria. Trauma, I started asking a lot more about it, but what is it? How does it impact us physically and mentally? Am I projecting my own trauma into the music space? What does trauma-aware or trauma-informed mean? And how do I become aware of trauma being present in my practice? Does being trauma-informed or trauma-aware differ based on the context I am working in? For example, if I'm working in post-conflict migration, does the nuance of trauma differ than if I was working in prisons? Or if I'm trauma-informed in one, I can be trauma-informed in all. Here, where Music on the Move was born. Music on the Move is my current research, which is music as a tool for social inclusion in the context of post-conflict migration. Music on the Move explores the knowledge, training, and supports available to the community musician working in contexts where trauma may be present. It examines the gap in the trainings, the gap in the available information and supports, where developing an arts-based, trauma-informed training program can be useful for community musicians. It co-creates, runs, and evaluates a training workshop as a response to the identified gaps. It is crucial to clarify from the very beginning that I'm not claiming by any means that this training will make any attendee a trauma-informed practitioner. It is designed to shed a light on the gaps identified, provide some exercises and knowledge that will allow practitioners to start considering and questioning areas in their own practice. This research was conducted in 2 phases. In phase 1, I did semi-structured ethnographical interviews with 14 participants who identified as researchers, music facilitators, volunteers, trauma therapists, managers of art organization, and resettlement and support worker. The aim of these interviews was to uncover what knowledge, training, supports did the facilitators were introduced to before, during, and after they were working in contexts of post-conflict and in contexts where trauma may reside, and what other information, other training that they would have felt necessary to have before, during, and after working in these contexts. It was important to uncover how facilitators understood trauma and how they reacted to it when they recognized its presence in their own practice. One facilitator expressed that trauma is not the event, trauma is the nervous system response to that event. So it is different things that can traumatize different people. Trauma, at its essence, is the same whether you have come from a conflict zone and walked across a continent, or you have been brought up in an abusive household. So your nervous system is going to operate in similar ways. Experienced facilitators were able to recognize trauma in participants' behaviors, such as freezing, disconnect, or being hyperactive and presenting as a difficult and challenging personalities. Some responded with providing a space for the participants to express what they are feeling and take a moment to breathe. Other, working with additional supports when and if they were available. Identifying one's own positionality is the first emergent theme. Our positionality can help us situate ourselves within the practice to fully understand our background, our social identity, and our hidden biases. It is important to note that most people who work in the context of post-conflict migration in Ireland are of Irish middle-class background, which provides them with certain privileges that they may not be aware of and that may impact their work. A participant indicated that it is very confronting when you come from a settled background, mostly middle-class European, to walk into an environment like that. It is an alien experience, and so many people were not ready for it and were not prepared for the things that they saw. Then also people were not necessarily prepared to know what to do with the disclosures that came up when people start to get to trust you. Reflexivity and reflectivity are the other side of positionality. Reflectivity and reflexivity can help facilitators develop an awareness and understanding of their thought processes, uncovering what might be going on with them, identifying ways they approach their work, and how they understand participants' stories, in addition to uncovering the motives and reasons for doing work with migrants, the power dynamics between the participant and the facilitators, and to uncover what facilitators bring into the workshop. As a participant said, the most important foundational piece of work is to ensure that the practitioners themselves understand their own trauma history, that they understand or recognize themselves and their needs first, that they can walk into a space with vulnerable people. Self-care and organizational support are crucial when working in contexts where trauma resides. I cannot hide that I was surprised when one very well experienced facilitator expressed, self-care, what does that mean? Community musicians in Ireland who mostly work as freelancers or self-employed, resulting in depriving them of organizational support and or even team member support. Some facilitators care for themselves by doing exercise, talking with friends, family, taking some personal time. Yet one facilitator indicated that, personally, I think about self-care as not just after, it's also before and during. So how do I prepare myself? Part of that is to make sure that I sleep well, that I eat well, that I drink good water, I have an exercise practice, have a meditation practice, that I have friends, fun and social life, and that I'm developing myself. Regular life routine. So I'm taking care of myself all the time. When working in contexts of forced migration, there is yet another layer to the relationship between facilitators and participants, especially when participants may be attempting to re-establish their social connection that they have lost throughout the conflict and resettlement. It is important to maintain flexibility in our working approach when leading the workshop, between being the leader sometimes and allowing others to lead, yet we need to keep demonstrating clear structure of the work, and it is crucial to establish clear boundaries between ourselves and the participants, because at times, from the good of the facilitator's heart and perhaps lack of experience, the boundaries between the facilitator and participants can become blurred. This may create a risk and a negative impact on both the facilitator and the participants. It is crucial to have clear boundaries and acknowledgements of what we as facilitators can offer and what is beyond our ability to change. For example, a facilitator indicated, "I can distinctly remember the moment when I was going for a run and I got a call from one of the people who were participants in my research, and she was being attacked by her abusive partner, and she was sitting on the street with all their bags 200 kilometers away from me, and I basically just broke down in tears and I was in a complete state." Safety in works where trauma resides is extremely important, and facilitators have indicated different angles to consider safety from: physical safety, emotional safety, creative safety, and gender safety. Where physical, people need to make sure that they're physically safe in the space and no one's going to attack them. Emotional safety, that they are accepted the way they are and no one's going to make fun of that. Creative safety, where that they believe that they have the creative ideas, they're worth sharing, no one is going to steal them, and they don't need to be perfect. Gender safety, we need to acknowledge that some of the refugee and migrant communities come from the LGBTQ plus community, which may be taboo in their own community, so they may not be able to disclose that in their own community, which may be another layer for them to feel unsafe in a workshop with a lot of different people. I have really to share this quote that is making me think in a different way at the moment of who is dictating safety, by whose rule the safe space is deemed safe, and for whom is the space safe. Then I started phase G of the research, which is the pilot of workshops. I spent nearly 6 months reading on the emergent themes, attending trainings, workshops, seminars to further my understanding of these themes, their impact on the practice, and how can they be developed into a useful training program. Then developed a roadmap and a blueprint for this workshop training, and then we did the first pilot with invited participants who are experienced researchers and facilitators, and the second was with the community music master students in the University of Limerick. Collecting data used arts-based methods, questionnaires and focus groups were used in both pilots to identify areas that the participants felt that needs more development, more in-depth work, and areas where they felt that they were enough information and enough things to get their brains going. To give you a glimpse of the training workshop, these are some of the exercises that I brought forward in this training, where we used a lot of narratives and stories that presents the impact of trauma on our body and how it manifests and how it shows and why. And these were from Levine's book, Waking the Tiger, Healing the Trauma. Then we did a lot of exercises to uncover our hidden biases about being reflective and reflexive, identifying our social identity and positionality, and we did a lot of work in pairs and in group to discuss certain issues. It is important to note that this training is still being developed through giving it to different groups in Limerick City and gaining their feedback, and yet tweaking the training to fit. So still work in progress. And here is some of the resources I used. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hala. I think this really supports where we talk about we're doing work with the community, not just for, but actually knowing, finding out, what do they want as well? It's so important in the work that we do. And so now I would like to open the invitation to, of course, those here in person and also those online. And also I would like to invite Cristina, Maria, Daniela, and Hala now to turn on your cameras, please, so that we could see you and maybe address the questions and open the discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi. Hello, yes. And do we have Joe as well? Perhaps Joe, if you would like to turn on your camera too. Hi, Joe. Yeah, and maybe to start, I would just like to open the questions to the floor. Is there anyone who has any discussion, or you would like to open a discussion that we would like to ask our presenters who are here with us today? Yes, we have a question here.
Hello, my name's Amy, and I'm a music therapist coming to this. So I was particularly interested in your work, Hala, on being trauma-informed in your work. And so coming from, I guess, the more health model, we are taught as trained therapists to have clear boundaries in our work, have regular supervision with a supervisor to unpack and explore some of the trauma we come into contact with through our work. And I'm very curious, as community musicians, as music and arts researchers in this healing practice through your research, and as music educators, also for those working with teenagers, learning other languages, you know, what practices are there for the professionals in that context to address this and learn and, I guess, keep yourselves safe while you're supporting these very vulnerable communities?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So sadly in Ireland, in community music organisation, there is not much support for community musicians. I myself had, my secondary supervisor was a music therapist, and I did I did counselling when I was doing this research, because I identified that I also come from a very traumatic background, and that could impact the work. And how do I unfold that and not bring it into the work and not impact the participants? And I think because we don't have that support in Ireland and most people work on their own, these kind of boundaries are very blurred. And I am Arab, I live in Ireland, but I'm actually from Palestine. So a lot of the Syrian community would want to be my friends because I'm an Arab-speaking woman. And in the beginning, out of your good heart, you want to help them, but then you have to say, I really can't, because that's messing up the boundaries. But that's a very difficult conversation to have with them. And it's very sensitive, you know, because then they're feeling a bit rejected by you, and you're like, no, I need to acknowledge what I can do and what I can't do. Sorry, but to get back to your question, there isn't much support unless you take your own initiative as a community musician in Ireland.
Thank you so much for your heartfelt sharing, Hala. I think we do empathize that it's really not easy to be in this position, and you know, you did share some tips on how we can actually practice self-care, because I think I myself work with the elderly community, and sometimes in the middle of 8 sessions of workshops, I get news that one of my participants have passed away. And how can I deal with it? You know, I still have to be there and be strong for the rest of my participants. So do you have any other tips that you would like to share with us, you know, for those who work with this community? How can we actually really actively practice self-care in this sense?
That's a very tricky question, because I never tell people how to care for themselves. It's just, I feel that every individual is different and every person's routine is different. I'll share what I do, and hopefully that could inspire people. I take about 5 minutes in my life for self-care. It could be at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day.
doing something that would calm my brain. I like jigsaw puzzles. So I take a little bit of a 20-minute or 30-minute after I turn off my computer just to wind down and do, but that what helps me. And I'm very conscious of telling people to do something that may actually not be helpful to them, because recently I've met with someone with, I don't know if I pronounce this correctly, oh God, they're very hyper. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it correctly and I don't want to say it wrongly. And how they wind down is actually by multitasking, by having something on the TV, something on their phone, someone talking to them, and then cleaning the house. And you're like, okay, but that's, so everyone is individual and everyone needs to sit down and think what is good for them. I'm sorry, I know I'm not giving you any tips, but I think it's a tricky area and I don't want to be telling someone something to do if it's not suitable for them.
No, I mean, thank you so much. I think it's a good point of reflection also for each one of us to think about what's actually best for us as well. Yes, I think Alexis has a question. Yes.
Thank you. It's not so much a question, but it's something that I would like to maybe throw to the whole panel as well, because I think that these discussions on self-care quite often put the onus on the individual to look after themselves. And I had some wonderful discussions recently with Alva Kenny, who I know that Hala works very closely with, in funding agencies sort of requiring therapy sessions or engagement with mental health services as part of difficult, challenging research work. And that sort of is a different way of assigning the responsibility for self-care, that it becomes a structural expectation that maybe is an easier way for a lot of people than trying to figure out what they need and fit it in. As you say, it can be 5 minutes, but often we need more than 5 minutes and we don't know what it is. So I just wanted to throw that thought out on organizing self-care somewhat differently.
Thank you, Alexis. Joe? Yes, Joe.
Well, I can allow space for the panel to respond to that first, but I just wanted to fold something in from our online chat. So would you like to have the panel respond first, or should I bring in the online chat?
Perhaps we can have the panel respond first, since we're on this topic. Is there any other panelists who would like to respond on this topic of self-care? No? Okay. Then I guess maybe, Joe, we could move on to the online questions.
Great. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to start by thanking all of the presenters for highlighting the political in SIMM practices. So starting with Cristina and Maria talking about inclusive education as a human right, and then highlighting that most of the activities were in the English language, if I'm correct, just to throw that out there. Daniela for highlighting the kind of aesthetic, social uprising as artistic output, beautiful. And Hala for highlighting the in-the-moment interactions and the privileges that people that may have not had trauma as part of their journey, kind of bringing that into the space as they interact with people that have experienced trauma in multiple and different ways. So thank you all. But I'm going to turn to the chat now because we've got a couple of questions. So the first one is a comment from Georgia. And Georgia has asked me to read this. Then after that, Jane, you're welcome to unmute or I can read on your behalf. So Georgia says, this is more a statement than a question, reflecting on the presentation of Daniela, which was so relevant to what is happening right now. Taking part in protests for Palestine, I experienced directly the transformative power of collective sound for mobilizing social action. I believe that exactly this collective sound is not only resonating, it empowers, it shifts the public opinion. So besides this positive impact, there is another side of collective sound, the sound of those who interrupt peaceful protests, such as the brutal police in Greece. So my question is, besides the collective musicking with means of voice, playing, dancing, how does the sound of police and even police brutality in many countries further resonate with the protesters and protests? I think that's one for you, Daniela.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so Georgia, thank you so much for sharing this statement and to see that my research also resonate with your experience. That's very powerful also for me to know that my research is like generating that impact and resonating with these other life experiences. And I fully agree with what you are saying. And in fact, what I want to challenge in my research per se is what is music, because music is not only what it's sung, it's not only the instruments, and it's not only the genre, the rhythms, but it's also all these other sounds that are impacting the nature of the music experience. I only refer in my presentation to the banging of pots and pans, but of course the sound of the police was a constant element that many of the demonstrators and musicians referred when I was interviewing them. And in fact, your comment rang me a bell of someone that talked to me saying that the protests were all about a war of sounds coming from the two sides of the battlefield. So it's the sounds of the protesters from one hand, but it's also the sound of the police on the other hand. And all of that will impact what is the music that we are experiencing. So I fully agree with that. And especially in the case of Chile, that sound of the police was also related with this sonic memory that many people protesting in the 2019, when listening to the sounds of the police, the gunshots, the police patrols, all these sounds were like brought back to the time of the dictatorship. So I completely agree with this statement that on the one hand, music and this sound experience can empower, but also is not only something that we consider positive or negative, because it's more attention between the two sides of the struggle, and it's also attention in what we can consider or not music in the case of a protest. So thank you so much for your question, and I hope I give a good answer. And if you want to talk more, I will be happy to do it further.
Thank you, Daniela. We have one more reflection in the chat that Jane has asked me to read. Is it okay if I read that now? Just checking in with the room.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so this is a reflection from Jane York. Jane says, I'm very interested in the tension between boundaries we set up in trauma-informed approaches and building relationships and trust when working with Indigenous or remote rural communities who may require a more connected or embedded approach. So Jane notes this isn't a question, but more of a reflection. So I'll just offer that into the space.
Thank you. Is there any additional response to Jane's comment?
Can I just say,
Yes.
I hope it's okay, Gillian, because this has reminded me of a conversation I had with you a while back about the idea of relationships. And what comes to my mind is then you told me that we're not always in relationships, we're in relation, and that there's a slight difference between building relationships and being in relations to others around us. And I think that kind of, and I don't know if Jane, if this helps or not, but that kind of helped me try to re-identify, but what does the word relationship mean to me? And how can I be in relation to my participants with setting boundaries? It's just, I find it easy to kind of, from the very get-go, kind of establish what I can do, what should they expect of me, and what I expect of them. So that's very clear. So then we are in relation to each other in that space of time. That's just what came to mind when I read that. Hope this helps.
Sorry, thank you, Hala. Does someone in the room? Oh, yes. Thank you.
So, yes, maybe thank you for the presentations. I'm happy to hear about the different topics. My reflection is about Daniela's presentation. and obviously the other are fantastic and maybe related to the same topic. In the direction that the sonic memory or sonic space, the last day maybe someone spoke about sonic space of belonging, and was interesting for me because as Daniela says, the music is not just a musicking or something like this, is the sound or the sounds, and how these sounds connect the people together or with a history, a memory. And in this direction, I can ask or listening more about how do you think that your experience construct these sonic spaces of belonging in the education space or in the space of reveal or construct or building the social fabric, or in the case of Daniela, in the middle of the conflict. Please, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your question. And yes, in fact, these sonic spacers and this sonic memory is completely related to the idea of belonging. And I will say that for what I've been able to see is, on the one hand, built on these past experiences, and that's why I highlighted that in my presentation, even I spoke very fast, with this past experience of protesters and the fact that many of them, for example, lived under the dictatorship. So these sonic memories were present in their life experience, but some of them also lived the time of the Unidad Popular. So having singing this song, singing Victor Jara, for example, singing Song of Quilapayún, Violeta Parra, brought them to this time in which they felt they belonged to this community, in which arts was going to make the roots for change. But I also think that your question made me think about another possibility of producing these spaces for belonging and make more people be able to participate in this. And is that I think that the protest and the music is something that bring people together, also as the comment of Georgia highlighted. But also another aspect that is relevant is how we can make possible that these experiences that we have can be transferred to the future generations. And many of my participants talked about the role of education and how this legacy of experiences, the legacy of experiences of recognizing this common history, recognizing the place to which we belong, can enable us to build a future in which these conflicts can be solved through other means. So that's why I was trying to highlight that in spite of these institutional setbacks and in spite of the problem with the constitution in Chile, and there was not like a real change in the institutional arena, all these other changes that impact more the self-experience of actors and their experience to live in a community can be very powerful and can be political in this broader sense. So thank you so much for your question. And again, I'm happy to discuss it further if you want.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you for your question. Of course, because due to time, I wish we could maybe ask more questions. But I think before we go to the online question, Joe, I do have a question for Cristina and Maria. And so thank you so much about presenting on this musical theater project. And as I mentioned, it's very heartening to see how the different interdisciplinary art forms actually come together and work together. And so on that aspect, I would like to ask if you could share more about this collaborative process and in particular, the role what was the role of the musician in this collaborative process? Yes.
Hi. Well, the role of the musicians, you mean the role of the music teachers in this case, or the role of the participants? Yes. The music teachers. The music teachers were the organizers of every activity in the room, to organize the groups, to make the people work, the students work, and to modulate these activities. But actually with the music, the students collaborate on the building of the sounds, the setting of the scene, right? And actually the music teachers were the mediators of the situations that were taking part there.
Thank you. Maybe Maria, do you have anything to add?
It's okay. Thank you.
There are only two teachers because they have two teachers, one for the primary level and the other ones for the secondary level, and they coordinate themselves very, very well. So they work in a group. There's two teachers, there are two female teachers, and they accommodate everything that which it's going to be done with the students. This theatrical dynamics, for example, and how they prepare the songs and the book, the English book. And they are very, very, I think it's a good example of coordination in the school, how they group work together.
Thank you for sharing. I think some of the challenges of working with different art forms would be sometimes to find a common language, let's say, and to actually really understand, well, the language of each art form. And sometimes when I work with dancers, as a musician, I feel that I don't want to just be the background music. I also want to understand the dance form itself and how can I actually relate the music better to the dance. So thank you very much for sharing. I think we have time for only one more comment online. Joe, is there?
Oh, no, it's fine. You've covered it. I just wanted to invite Cristina and Maria to comment. So I had a question, but we're there and we're at time. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you to our presenters again for sharing.